incidents reports on the allegations of the sexual harassment with the police on the 4 alleged perpetrators, namely Jeremiah Koskei, Mr. Samuel Ebey, who worked for Ekatera Teas and Infusions, Mr. John Chepochok, and John Asava, who worked at James Finley, Kenya. Mr. Speaker, James Finley, Kenya terminated the contract agreement with John Chepochok's company, which is called Silso Holdings. They have also suspended Mr. John Asava. The company has barred Mr. John Chepochok and Mr. John Asava from entering James Finley, Kenya premises. Ekatera Teas and Infusions reported that they had suspended Mr. Jeremiah Koskei and Mr. Samuel Ebey and barred the 2 named persons from accessing Ekatera Tea and Infusions premises. And this, Mr. Speaker, was to prevent them from interfering with the process of investigations. Mr. Speaker, this is evidence on record that Mr. Sylvia Den, who is the regional managing director, acknowledged that incidences of sexual harassment were happening in Ekatera Lipton Teas and Infusions. However, since taking up the position in 2019, she has put measures and created awareness to mitigate the incidences. The company is working towards a 0% rate of gender-based violence in the tea estates. Further, the company doesn't outsource any labor except the security services. Number 5, Mr. Speaker, the shop stewards at Ekatera Tea and Infusions distinguished between incidences of unwelcome sexual harassment and incidences of sex for work, where the sex for work was sought for opportunities for employment, promotions, lighter duties, being graded, thus increase in pay. However, no written submissions were presented on the specific incidences or names of persons affected. Mr. Speaker, the committee observed that although there are sexual harassment policies, trainings, and reporting channels available, reporting was minimum, which makes it difficult to address the incidences. From the foregoing, the committee finds that there is credible evidence on record that there is sexual harassment in some tea estates in Kericho County, and that though there are sexual harassment policies, trainings, and reporting channels available, reporting was very minimum. Number 2, Mr. Speaker, to establish the measures the government is putting in place to protect the rights of workers in these tea estates, the committee noted that there is gender office within the grounds of Kericho Police Station, whose independence was in question, having been funded by the James Finlay's Kenya Tea Estate. However, the county security team informed the committee that James Finlay only provided the funds for construction of the center. The center is fully manned by the police officers and is independent of the James Finlay Kenya Limited. The company, Mr. Speaker, handed the community policing as an avenue of reporting information related to sexual harassment and abuse appeared not to be very active, as the incidences of sexual harassment continued happening but not reported. The county security team submitted that there is the community policing and the Nyumba Kumi initiative at the ward level to enable the citizenry report various issues, including gender-based violence. Mr. Speaker, the effectiveness of the various channels put in place to deal with sexual harassment and abuse appears to be poor. Both James Finlay and Ekatera submitted that all employees have access to reporting mechanisms, which include welfare committees, toll-free anonymous call numbers, bulk SMS messages for mass communication, use of notice boards, use of suggestion boxes, training of village committees on sexual harassment and other forms of abuse, among others. The company is committed to continuously improve the system. Mr. Speaker, we also noted, and this is important for the women leaders in this House to hear, that there are few women in leadership positions at James Finlay, Kenya. The composition of women leadership is at 25%, 29% at the lower management level, 19% at the high management level, 6% at junior management level, and 24% at senior level management. James Finlay Management submitted that it conducts gender surveys and that there is continued effort to be female gender inclusive through management trainees programs for women and training of women in ICT. The criteria used to outsource labor services at James Finlay was unclear. The company submitted that it conducts a pre-qualification exercise for the services. Services outsourced include labor, maintenance, and construction. However, it was disputed that by the labor unions who accused the company of directly procuring the services of the accused persons, company called Silso Holdings. The committee also observed that the government has instituted measures to guard against sexual harassment abuses. These include the enactment of Sexual Offences Act and the Employment Act, the community policing, the presence of police station, labor and gender offices in counties, and other initiatives aimed at enabling women seek guidance on the rights and launch complaints against sexual harassment. The committee nonetheless noted that many women were not aware of the initiatives and therefore not making use of them. Mr. Speaker, on the issue of establishing the measures the government is putting in place to ensure that these tier states adhere to labor laws and implement policies on sexual harassment, the committee observed that there is a gap in the frequency of reporting the sexual harassment incidences despite the documented available reporting channels. There is a need for collaborative effort by the stakeholders, which are the Labor Department, the trade unions, the legislators, to come up with a clear and better framework for reporting. Number two, Mr. Speaker, the outsourcing of employees through contracts was a weak link in enforcing the sexual harassment policies. For instance, at James Finlay, the alleged perpetrator, Mr. John Chepochok, owes Sislo Holding, a company contracted to provide contracted labor to James Finlay. The contract company is in charge of performance and retention of employees. The competition for the available scarce employment opportunities for placement leaves the employees prone to exploitation and harassment. The committee resolved to initiate legislation to govern outsourcing of labor services. Mr. Speaker, Ekaterra Tea and Infusions has 43% of female supervisors and managers, and we are working towards increasing the number to 50%. The committee commended this, but cautioned against discrimination against male gender competing for the same positions. Further, it advised that the influence and ability to effect change of the female supervisors and managers should be empowered to effectively root out the vice. The committee finds that whereas workers acknowledged that there are policies to ensure adherence to labor laws, the same workers cited frustrations in reporting cases since the culprits were never brought to book. Consequently, many of them no longer report the cases to authorities. And lastly, Mr. Speaker, to establish investigations into the heinous acts and to ensure the culpable perpetrators are brought to book and justice, the committee noted that the investigations by the DCI into the allegations of sexual harassment and exploitation were progressing slowly. Further, the Kericho County Security Team reported that they are yet to interview the BBC journalist who made the documentary to receive any evidence on the incidences as reported in the documentary at the time of the visit of the committee. The 4 persons named in the documentary as the perpetrators had not been arrested nor charged in court of law since no victim had filed complaints against them to the police. The labor officer, Kericho County, did not report the frequency of their visits to the tier states on matter sexual harassment. There is one labor officer in the whole county, and this may affect the quality and quantity of his visits. So, Mr. Speaker, based on these findings, the committee made a number of recommendations that the Directorate of Criminal Investigation should fast-track their investigations to identify the victims of the alleged sexual harassment and bring those culpable to book. 2, Mr. Speaker, the victims of the sexual harassment in the T estates should report the incidences to the police for investigation and criminal prosecution. 3, Mr. Speaker, the victims of the sexual harassment should report the incidences to the county gender office and the county labor office. So, Mr. Speaker, we have made available the report to members, and I beg now to table the report of the committee and request the Honorable Kuria Kimani, the member for Molo, to second. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. I rise to second the report by the Departmental Committee on Labor on an inquiry regarding sexual harassment of female workers in tea estates in Kericho County through a statement sought by the Honorable County Member of Parliament for Kericho County.
Proceed.
Thank you very much, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, the Chair for Labor, the Honorable Eric Mushangi, aka Karemba, and I were both students of Kenyatta University, including the Honorable Dean Nyoro, our Chair for Budget, and we've remained quite friends quite some time together. And perhaps that's why he asked me to second this motion, although I'm not a member of this committee. Honorable Speaker, this revelations by this BBC expose is very painful for the millions of workers in this country. It is even more painful that it took a BBC expose for us to know the fates and the suffering of these women in Kericho County. And really thank the Honorable County MP for Kericho for bringing this attention to this House and the Committee on Labor for doing thorough investigation and tabling the report before us. But of course, Honorable Speaker, I note in the report that as you would expect, there is not much evidence that they were able to get, mainly because the victims of sexual harassment were intimidated, they feared for their lives, and therefore no single culprit of this sexual harassment came to testify before the committee. Which begs the question, Mr. Speaker, what is happening in places of work across the Republic? Which begs the question, what is happening to women who work in various institutions in this country? And I dare say, Mr. Speaker, this harassment does not just go for women. We have had cases of also men being sexually harassed at their workplaces, Mr. Speaker, when they are going to work, and even in the normal operations of their businesses, Mr. Speaker. One would wonder whether we are short of laws to protect against sexual harassment in this country. And the answer is no. Article 27 of the Constitution, Honorable Speaker, prohibits any kind of discrimination, including gender, anywhere in this country. Section 23 of the Sexual Offences Act expressly says what sexual harassment is, and unfortunately only sets a penalty of up to 100,000 shillings and an imprisonment of up to 3 years for these particular offences. So perhaps it is high time that this Honourable House reviewed this particular act and reviewed the fine and the imprisonment term or the punishment that should be vetted by these sexual offenders, Honourable Speaker. The Employment Act, Section 6.1, again, talks expressly about how we should relate with each other at our workplaces, Honourable Speaker. But perhaps this sexual harassment does not just happen. It's not just happening in Kericho. Our police stations have become another place for sexual harassment. And most of the police stations that you'll find in this country, Mr. Speaker, do not have separate cells for men and for women. And most importantly, very few of them have separate cells for children. And even the ones that have separate cells for children offenders, they did not separate between the boys and the girls. So you have a child offender who is arrested, who is taken to a police station, who is a boy, and is being kept in that polling station among other criminal men. And by morning, Mr. Speaker, a lot has happened to that, to those young offenders, Mr. Speaker. So I think it is a high time that our executive, and especially our our Ministry of Interior, rethinks about how our police cells are being made, so that we make sure even if these people are offenders, they still have their rights. And we should still protect them from harassment in those particular cells. So I really hope that we are going to have those cells clearly defined. This is for men, this is for women, and most importantly, for the young offenders, to make sure there are those cells for the young boys and the young girls, Mr. Speaker. This morning, when I was preparing to second this motion, I talked to one Corporal Beth Kamau, a police officer in charge of gender at Elbagon Police Station. And Mr. Speaker, I was surprised to note that 75% of all cases registered in that Elbagon Police Station. And she was saying that this is actually the statistics for police stations across the country, because they have a group where they shared all those reports with other gender officers. So 70% of all cases reported in police stations in this country relates to gender-based violence. Mr. Speaker, in the mornings when I'm coming to work, I like to listen to Classic 105. And some of those debates on Classic by Maina and Kingangi sometimes are very controversial. And Mr. Speaker, I get very surprised when I hear stories of men and women talking about being beaten like it is the order of the day. Talking about women who are battered to near death. And they say, what do I do, Maina? Where do I go, Maina? And these cases go on and on. A few months ago, there was a debate about now men who are being clobbered by their wives. Even one saying that he lost his eye. Another one says he was still limping. And we have the way the discussion goes is that it's so casual because it is the order of the day. And this is really to urge Kenyans, and especially even those in abusive marriages, that when it comes to that violence, when your wife or your husband is beating you up, you are a potential to death any minute. You are a candidate of death any minute. Because sometimes, I remember, Honorable Speaker, there was a case in high school of a case in, I think it was Nyahururu, where when the husband went to hit the wife ran out, and the only thing that she saw that was near that you could protect her from being hit was an axe. And so when now she was trying now to defend herself with an axe, their small around 1.5-year-old baby woke up. And now when he came to the sitting room, and now the husband was trying to take away the axe from the woman, the axe actually fell on that boy, and that boy died. And that guy ended up being imprisoned in Nakuru, and then I think he's still serving his term for murdering his son. I'm sure he didn't intend to kill the son. But when now we resolved violence, instead of sitting down as adults and having a conversation about the issues that are affecting us, then know that death becomes ultimate, and perhaps you might even find yourself as a candidate for murder. So it's really to encourage all of us, especially in marriage institutions, that let us resolve to dialogue, and let us not normalize abuse, physical abuse, as if it's the order of the day. And even when our friends come to us and tell us that they have been beaten up, let us offer solid and sound advice. For example, being firm and saying, you cannot hit me again, you should never hit me, including, if possible, going to record a settlement at a police station. And not just to wait until they are killed by their spouses, and then we rush to the funeral in printed T-shirts of their photos, eulogizing them and saying how great those people are. Mr. Speaker, was the issue of early or teen pregnancies. That again, the cases that she has to deal with every day is like, she was saying, like currently she's investigating 13 cases of pregnancies in just 3 schools. 3 schools, 13 cases of teen pregnancies. And who are the ones responsible? Grown adults. And perhaps I'm wondering, what is this that men see in small children that they don't see in adult women? What is this? I think perhaps the Q in LGBTQ, that queer thing, is how you look at a child and think about having sexual intercourse with them. I think men, we should stand up. We should be the one protecting our children. And this issue of having sex with underage children must stop so that we protect our future generations. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I again support this great report by the Departmental Committee on Labor as done by my friend, Honorable Eric. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Honorable members, let me acknowledge the presence in the public gallery this afternoon of students from the very famous Precious Blood Rerouter from Dagoretti North constituency, Nairobi County. This is not a matter of discussion, but what is it, Honorable Lachi?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you for just allowing me to appreciate our girls' school. That is an excellent school in this country. But more importantly, just to say, Reruta Precious Blood Girls' School is a school that believes in a minuscule of 10. And we always appreciate that. I want to tell the girls, welcome to Parliament. Enjoy, but inspire yourself as you live here. Just pray that one day you will be in this house, either as a member of Parliament or even as a speaker of this Parliament. So enjoy yourselves, and more importantly, remember always what we say, read your books, read that storybook that you always sustain as the culture of Precious Blood. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable member, that is not a matter that requires discussion. And allow me and allow the House to proceed unless there's a very special point of order. But I think we don't need to go that direction. Let me first announce that at exactly 5, I'll be calling upon the Honorable Member for Butere, Tindi Mwale, to actually, as the Speaker had directed earlier, to move a motion of adjournment on a matter of urgent national importance to discuss the mysterious disease outbreaks in schools in the country. Honorable members, I now propose the question that this House adopts the report of the Departmental Committee on Labor on the inquiry regarding sexual harassment of female workers in tea estates in Kericho County, laid on the table of the House on Thursday, 23rd March 2023. The first member to have a bite on this is Honorable Farah. Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, I want to commend this committee for having done such a good job. Having said that, Mr. Speaker, it is a pity, 60 years after independence, with the blood of Samoei Ole Koitalel, the land that was grabbed and stolen from the Africans of this country is still owned by the same thugs who stole it. And today, the poverty-stricken sons and grandsons and granddaughters of the same people who fought for this country are begging those multinationals to give them jobs that pay menial amounts of money and in the process, those girls are being raped. Mr. Speaker, not yet Uhuru. Anybody who thinks that we got independence, we never got independence. Our independence is just symbolic. This country, where the Maasais who lost millions of acres have their land occupied by families, 150,000 kilometers of land is a ranch somewhere in Laikipia. The Delamayers have what you call, I don't know, 600,000 or 1 million acres. Everybody else has those millions, and the poor guys are grazing their cows in our towns and in our cities because they don't have any place to graze them. This government, Mr. Speaker, if it's not ready, as it calls itself the Hustler Nation, to go and make a compulsory acquisition of all these lands and distribute to the same farm workers who are being raped and harassed and given menial jobs and living a life of destitution. If it's not given to it, then it does not justify to be called a Hustler Nation. Mr. Speaker, if somebody comes to this country and says that he's going to have a new land policy, which is going to reward the Mau Mau children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the people who died for us, what does Dedan Kimathi have in the form of a land today? Everything is owned by the collaborators. And a house like this and the subsequent governments have been sanitizing that. Today, we are talking about companies that own 200,000 acres of tea farms. And we are begging them not to rape our girls who are earning 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. And the land belonged to their own ancestors who fought. Otherwise, you would all be slaves in somewhere in Mississippi and California and God knows where, if it is not for those Maasais and those Kalenjins who fought those days and made sure that those people do not make any inroads into this country. And the same slave owners, same imperialists who did what they did to us, still own the land the way they want it. And the whole games, they have what you call everywhere. Look at the ranches and the way they run them in there, in the form of families, when the indigenous owners of this land are not there anymore. I know if a Mugabe comes into this country and asks Kenyans to support him, Del Monte, look at it. 990-something thousand acres, what do you call years? What kind of a lease is called 990-something? Who made the laws? Who was consulted? Were we consulted as Africans when they were legislating on our lands? They came and colonized us. They held us against our wish and our will. And then they own the land, the prime land right now. And the only Africans who are very happy are those ones who had access to government those days and were given millions of acres, and they are going to protect them because they are exactly like them. They are exactly like them. These families, African families who are holding millions of acres, that land must be reclaimed and redistributed. Redistributed to the real sons and daughters of this land who fought for the future of this, who fought for the independence we enjoy, who fought the fact that we are not slaves, we are not taken as slaves or whatever it is, to Carolinas and the West Indies and South America, God knows what. Mr. Speaker, it is a pity. And I think the earlier this House, listen to me, members of Parliament, I just don't want you to applaud. I want you to make the right legislative decisions to reclaim all those lands and ask them to pay us compensation for all the exploitation they have been doing for the last 100 years. They exploited. They don't have to be paid for it. They don't have to be paid for it. And the African landowners who inherited the whites and are masters right now, owning millions of acres, must redistribute that land to the people whose fathers and grandfathers and great-grandfathers fought for this land's change. Mr. Speaker, we need to have a country in which, as a legislature, we want.
Please give him 1 minute.
Okay. Mr. Speaker, and I'm imploding. I'm pleading with you, members of Parliament. I'm pleading with you, my brothers and sisters. I have been in this house 30 years ago, and I'm still there, and we are still suffering the way we were suffering 30 years ago. Some of these are historical injustices. That's why nobody wants to see the Ndungu Commission, what they call implemented. Nobody wants to see the TJRC report implemented. Nobody wants. Some Africans go there, make a deal with the whites out there, and the rest of us, the 50 million today. Before we were only 7 million, 8 million. Today we're 50 million. The 50 million are basically paupers And we only have 50 billionaires in this country who are Africans, and who have stolen from us. So what we need to do as a house, somebody must bring a bill that says that there has to be a compulsory acquisition to have a new land policy for this country to reward the landless who cannot even get a 6x5 where they can be used for a grave for themselves.
We have Honorable Farah, you have spoken very well on this matter, and we added you 1 minute. Please allow the other members also to speak on this, so that, okay, because of public demand, we add you 1 more minute, please.
Can I have my mic? I will keep on it. I will be impressed with the fact that you are applauding what I'm saying if you tomorrow come to my office and we decide making a bill that is going to make a compulsory acquisition of that land to be redistributed to the landless people. And if you're not alone, I want us all, this house has got to change the future of this country. Point of order? Okay.
You may take your seat.
Yes.
Point of order, Honorable Millie.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. And Mr. Speaker, very respectfully, because I don't want to interfere with my senior, he came to Parliament before me, and I've been fairly patient. And as a human rights defender of women, I'm just wondering where land and women come from. The things he's talking about are very important, but we're talking about sexual harassment of women in Kericho Tea Estate. Whenever we have issues relating to women, we start identifying with the land, cars, chairs, mountains, and elephants. Mr. Speaker, where is the relevance of women being sexually harassed and land? As much that is important, can the honorable member bring a different motion on land ownership, and we'll support him. But right now, our concern is the issue of women harassment in Kericho Tea Estates. Stick to the rules of relevance, please. Thank you.
The rules of relevance are there, Madam.
Honorable Farah.
I'll just finish, because you took my time. Let me just conclude.
Honorable
The
Farah,
rules of the relevance
proceed.
is that these people are working in land. They are being victimized because they're working on land and on farms, tea farms. So the synergy between, and they deserve to own that land themselves instead of becoming there something which is an indentured slaves and labor. So that is where the synergy is there. That is where the synthesis is there. These people need to take charge of that land themselves instead of becoming workers and with the land that was fought for and died for by their ancestors. Thank you.
Very well. The Honorable Francis Sigay, Honorable Member for Sotik.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me this opportunity to also ventilate on this very serious issue. And Mr. Speaker, I rise to defend the rights of women. The issues which has been brought up by this motion by Honorable Beatrice Kemei has come at the right time. And Mr. Speaker, I know, I come from that region, and I know that there have been a lot of malpractices which have been going on in the tea estates. And Mr. Speaker, while I condemn what was reported in the BBC, I also would like to ask the government to take serious action on the perpetrators who are very brave to do what they were doing. And Mr. Speaker, this House must stand to defend our women. We have seen our women, because of poverty, Mr. Speaker, and because of the low pay being given by these tea estates, we would like to appeal to the government to look at particularly the issue of pay, how much they are paying the tea estates. Mr. Speaker, these women are surviving from hand to mouth. And they are the people who have children and they are suffering. Mr. Speaker, I would like to see the perpetrators taken to court. And the law must take its course. Mr. Speaker, I have seen many of these issues being raised. But you see, for a long time, Mr. Speaker, these issues have been put under the carpet. People I want to thank the people who did this thing. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, I want to regret that one of those people who revealed these malpractices in the tea estates was killed. I don't know by who. And it's very sad that people who are bringing out issues which are supporting and actually empowering our women are the ones who meet some serious criminal activities. And Mr. Speaker, I really sympathize with that, for the family of that man who was killed. And Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, I would like to support the honorable member and thank her for this wonderful job. And Mr. Speaker, we would like to go further and look at the issues of land law and labor laws in the tea estates with a view to changing them so that it can be friendly to the workers, not only women, even men, Mr. Speaker. Even men that the estates are also suffering, but they don't talk about these things. So we would like Honorable Beatrice to go further and propose some legislation which can be able to protect our people in Kericho. I'm happy that at last this Honorable MP, our good lady from Kericho, was able to bring this issue up. And I support her fully. And Mr. Speaker, I am requesting her to go ahead and look at the legislation which can assist, protect our people who are poor in these areas. And Mr. Speaker, I would like particularly to ask the honorable member to look at the issue of pay. What are they being paid? How much do they earn per day? I think, Mheshimiwa, I would like, through the chair, through the speaker, I would like to see legislation. Go further, Mheshimiwa, and let us have legislation. Mr. Speaker, I beg to support.
Very well. The Honorable Gabriel Kagomba. Kagombe of Gatundu South, he is not in the House. Next is the Honorable Peter Kihungi Kangema. Proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I start to support the report on the investigation that the government should take up the investigations. One thing I want to say that I'm a member of Labour Committee, and also I was one of the team that went. And Mr. Speaker, it's so painful as you watch the people and the women who are working in those estates. They live as if they don't live in this country, whereby there is no law, there is nobody who is there to care for them. They seem extremely helpless. Because, Mr. Speaker, as we were trying to interrogate on the issues, when you went on the site to start talking to somebody maybe whereby he feels as if he's secure, nobody will be able to notice. They give you stories of how the person who has been given the contract, the contract for labor, how he misuses those women. We are told that whenever he has a desire for a woman, he doesn't have to take a lodge because the estates has forests they have forests that are man-made for wood for boilers. They usually do sex with women inside those forests. Therefore, the thing is so abhorrent, and I think as we are putting it, it's not as easy as we can see. I wish those estates as they are, we were told it's only maybe that the new government has come. They could not allow anybody to access those estates. We got a letter the BBC wrote. The BBC, before it aired the exposure, they wrote to the companies and gave them the evidence and the issues that has been raised by the person who was about to do the story. When they got that information, they did not care. They did not even answer. They did not even try to manage the exposure because they knew the government will do nothing and nothing will happen to them because they are in control. Mr. Speaker, when we met the DCIs, the labor people, they were defending the tea estates. When we met them at a town, in a meeting where we met at the county commissioner's office, they were defending the tea estates. Therefore, I wonder where these people can report their cases, because the administrations, the people who are supposed to represent them, they are the people who we are defending, saying that these are things which are there to fight the tea estates. But when you get to the real issue, you discuss with the women, we discuss with the men, we discuss with the shop stewards, where they tell you, even if we give you the evidence, do not expose us because we'll be sacked. Therefore, what I wish to say is that as the report has come, whatever was aired, that's the truth. That guy called Bochek, whatever, is a guy who was an employee. He used to practice sexual harassment to women. He was later given the contract now to be the person who was outsourcing the labor for those companies. Therefore, he continued. And I want to prove that guy is still working there. Therefore, what I want to say is that those people are helpless. The government is doing nothing. The administration allowed Kericho. We can't say they will help those people. The DCI, the REBA, they were defending them. They were saying that those are people who want to fight the companies. Those are wars between the companies. Therefore, what I want to say is that let's trust the government that it will act on this issue. But I want to say that those people who are working in tea estates, they are extremely helpless. Furthermore, they don't feel the presence of government. They just feel in another country, which is Kenya, where there is no law. There are people who are governed by the estate and the managers who do whatever they want because they control the government. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, I wish the government should take up this issue. Should take up this issue seriously and help our people in those tea estates. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well, the Honorable Julius Ole Sunkuli.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for this opportunity. And I speak about Kericho because when I first became a magistrate, that's where I was posted. And the lifeline of Kericho is the tea estates. Without the tea estates, Mr. Speaker, there is no Kericho. The Kericho, I think, today is one of the most beautiful places in Kenya. You compare it with Limuru, which is also very beautiful. And the economy of Kericho has always been the tea estate. And it has not just benefited the people of Kericho in terms of employment. Many people in the South Rift seek employment in Kericho. And I think, Mr. Speaker, it is very, very important that we make this point because this report that has been tabled shows that there has been a problem, and there is a problem with respect to those who go to seek employment in Kericho. And I want to urge the people, the management of the estates in Kericho, whether they be James Finlay, George Williamson, or the successor of Unilever, all those big estates, I want to beg them to take responsibility over these issues. Even before the policemen are invited to this investigation, the estates themselves should look into this matter. because that is the place, the destination of many of our people. And the livelihoods of our people rely, on these estates. And Mr. Speaker, I want to urge the honorable members that if we want our people to continue working in Kericho, in the tea estates in Kericho, let us desist from thinking that one day when we subdivide the estates in Kericho, life will be better. In fact, it is like going to slay the chicken that lays, or rather the goose that lays the golden egg. I personally stand to say that let us protect the estates the way they are. If you leave it to these, to our people, Mr. Speaker, many things happen. In Kericho itself, another employer, used to be called the Tea Hotel, was very good when it was run by those estates. Then our people agitated and said, we want these companies to be out of Tea Hotel. And that was the jewel of the South Rift. Today, there is no Tea Hotel. Our good African people messed it up. If you open up this idea that we want to remove these estates and give it to Africans, they'll go and make them small, tiny things, and you will not even be discussing about this today. I know that there is a problem. And the problem, sometimes these foreigners, whether you are talking about the British people from who ran James Findlay or George Williamson or Unilever, they acquire some habits that are a little bit colonial. And that is what we should attack. We must tell them that this is a free country. It happens in our own Transmara sugar company. You cannot even enter to see the managing director unless you are his color. That is what we should attack. And we attack things like the ones we are attacking today. We don't want people to go there and be told it is sex for work. People must be given responsibilities because of their abilities or because there are vacancies that are there. Kericho is large enough for all of us. And I want to say, Mr. Speaker, that this motion has brought up these issues. I hope that they are listening. I hope that they will retain the dignity of the women, but also that the honorable members, as they speak, should not ever want to destroy the nature of Kenya. Because today you will say that we subdivide Kericho, and then the next time you want to subdivide the Masai Mara, and then you want to subdivide, I think we should retain as much as possible our big estate, because we are a capitalist country. With those remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support.
Very well. The Honorable Millie Odhiambo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. And Mr. Speaker, let me start by the onset to thank the committee for that report. I only wish they had given even stronger recommendations, because I think if I see one of the things you are putting is that victims should report, but given the nature of the society, victims will not report, especially where they are inferior, superior kind of relationship. So I think maybe you should have put a greater onus on the companies to make sure they have a sexual harassment policy and to make sure that they have systems in place. And also you should have put stronger language against the government. I also wish to thank the BBC for the expose, because it's even though it's very embarrassing that we have a whole government with the legislature, executive and judiciary, and it takes BBC to expose this. That means there is somewhere where there is something that is not operational. Mr. Speaker, if there is one thing that we have done well as a country, it is to legislate. Perhaps we might even be accused of over-legislating, because we have a lot of laws on sexual and gender-based violence. Mr. Speaker, just starting with the Constitution itself, Article 2.5 and 2.6 import international conventions that are protective of women, including the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And Mr. Speaker, if you look at it, even if you look at other laws, the Sexual Offences Act, Counter Trafficking in Persons Act, Victim Protection Act, amongst many others. So we have a plethora of laws that are protective of women. Where we fail is in implementation, and that is actually the role of the executive. It's embarrassing that a lot of women report cases of abuse against them, and no action is taken. Mr. Speaker, before I came into this parliament, most of my work entailed dealing with issues of abuse, but especially against children. And it was embarrassing that you find cases like this. You find sometimes foreigners.
Order, Honorable Millie. The time now being 5, as had been ruled by the Speaker, I now want to ask the Honorable Tindi Mwale to move his motion. Honorable Millie, you will still have your balance of 8 minutes to speak on this particular motion. Honorable Tindi, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise on the ruling of the Speaker, which he granted that we have time to debate about the mysterious disease outbreaks in schools in this great republic of ours, Kenya. Mr. Speaker, it's very sad for both the parents and the community at large to lose children or to lose loved ones because of a problem that could have been contained, a problem that could have been solved, and especially, Mr. Speaker, it's very sad when the government and the Ministry of Health doesn't come out clear and address the issues that are affecting our children in schools. We saw recently there was a report by the Director General of Health who gave a statement and said that some of the schools affected, the students had suffered from typhoid and a disease called amoebiasis. Mr. Speaker, some of the victims, it's reported that when they went to some of the health facilities in Kisumu, and to be specific, there is a laboratory called Path Kenya Care. Mr. Speaker, it was found out that some of the students had suffered from cholera. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge the country, the government, and Kenyans at large to treat this matter of mysterious diseases in schools with great urgency, great importance, because if you are not careful, Mr. Speaker, you might find this disease outside of schools. This disease might come into our environment, because the moment you close the schools, Mr. Speaker, you are letting these children to come outside to their community. Some of these students come from very far, Mr. Speaker, and you might find us as a country transporting disease all over the country. Mr. Speaker, I want to point out some few issues. Mr. Speaker, which the Minister of Health, in conjunction with the Minister of Education, and also the community at large, and Kenya and government should put into consideration. Mr. Speaker, we have the issue of food, Mr. Speaker, which the students take in schools. It's very tricky and very hard to ascertain the food safety in our schools, Mr. Speaker. When I talk about food safety, I'm trying to mean, Mr. Speaker, the source of the food, how it is stored, transported to the school, and how it's kept, cooked, and served to the students. Mr. Speaker, many of the schools do not take into consideration measures of trying to ascertain that the food being brought to the schools is safe for consumption. And that's why we end up with contaminated food, and this contamination of food ends up in our children's stomachs and eventually causes health problems, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the second issue is about the way the structures are built in our schools, Mr. Speaker. If we don't put into consideration the way we plan our schools or institutions, Mr. Speaker, you might find even the sewerage systems mixing with the lines of clean water, Mr. Speaker. And the moment that happens, we also find a problem which arises to diseases such as cholera and typhoid, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, health is devolved, and therefore the Ministry of Health, in conjunction with the county government, they are supposed to put up measures to make sure that health of the students in institutions is adhered to, where we have, even if it's possible, we have small clinics properly placed in schools or institutions so that the county government is able to monitor the progress of the health issues in schools, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, so far we have 5 schools that have been reported to have been closed because of these problems, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, just to single out Mukumu Girls High School, where even a teacher had to lose life because of negligence, maybe from the school management, Ministry of Health, or the students themselves. Mr. Speaker, our schools are overpopulated. Unless we control and manage the population of students in schools, Mr. Speaker, the structures, the land size, and the facilities used by the students will automatically diminish or be very small to take care of the students, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I know this problem is facing so many of my colleagues, including my brother, who is the MP for Shinyalu, Honorable Freddy Kana, where Mukumu Girls High School is situated, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, even in Butere constituency, where I come from, my own school, Butere Boys High School, was the second one to be closed because of outbreak of cholera disease, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues to join in, debate this matter with great importance, and also, Mr. Speaker, outline issues and outline ways in which the government can and will protect our kids and students in schools, not excluding the teachers and the subordinates in our institutions, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, I want, as I finish, to condole with the family of the victims who lost, students who lost their lives. I want to encourage them, and also the family of the teacher who lost her life. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity that you have given me, and also the opportunity which you allowed this adjournment motion to be given time to be heard, Mr. Speaker. With those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I support the motion.
You move the motion. Honorable members, this being an adjournment motion, under Standing Order 33, all other contributors to this motion will have only 5 minutes. The first one being the Honorable Ikana.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this motion that is seeking to address the crisis that we are currently facing in our schools. I wish from the onset to state the very fact that one of the most affected schools, which is Mukumu Girls, is from my constituency. It's very, very sad that we have had to lose very young souls that had a promising future. As we stand here, Mr. Speaker, in Shinyalu constituency and other regions of the country, we are mourning the loss of 3 students from Mukumu Girls. We are mourning the innocent life of Diana Mambiri. We are mourning the innocent life of Wendy Oyugi and Miriam Namachanja. We are also mourning the life of our teacher, Mrs. Juliana Mujema, who was the boarding mistress at Mukumu Girls. Mr. Speaker, I want to urge my colleagues here in Parliament that we put our heads together and come up with lasting solutions that shall ensure that this crisis of disease outbreaks every now and then that has been bedeviling our schools is addressed once and for all. Of course, I understand that for those who have lost their loved ones, there's very little that can be done. But again, as a responsible government, it is my kind request and expectation that the government, through the relevant ministries, shall come up with at least a way of ameliorating the situation of those families that have lost their loved ones, and also those that are still nursing hundreds of children who are currently sick. One of the suggested ways that I want to propose to this House of ensuring that the lives of our little ones that we put in the care of the various schools is safe is by ensuring that we fix the whole issue of procurement. Mr. Speaker, we have a lot of gaps when schools are allowed to freely and randomly procure goods and services that are consumed by our students. We need to assure that at least in every school, there are set standards for quality assurance of those goods, and especially food and water that is consumed by our students. You will also realize that if you make a random visit to some of our schools, you will find their sick bays, the so-called sick bays in schools, always full. It takes a little bit long for some of our teachers or headmistresses and headmasters to take action on when to take our ailing students to various hospitals for checks and proper medical care. We need to come up with a solution and compel the heads of these various institutions to ensure whenever students fall sick, they should not wait for too long before either contacting their parents or taking them for proper and comprehensive medical care. And generally to the Ministry of Education, I would want to say, as a representative of the good people of Shinyalu, where Mukumu Girls High School is domiciled, I'm very disappointed for the time that they took to react to the cries of the parents and to the cries of the various leaders to take action and save lives. I hope, Mr. Speaker, that after this debate, we shall come up with long-lasting solutions and once and for all address issues of disease outbreaks in schools. Thank you so much. God bless you.
Thank you very much. The Honorable Elsie Mwanda, the Member of Parliament for Kakamega County.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for granting me this opportunity to speak to this problem, which is a national crisis. And as a mother and a grandmother, coming from Kakamega County, where most of this problem has been seen, because, Mr. Speaker, 3 of the schools in my county have been affected, namely the Sacred Heart Mukumu Girls, St. Peter's Mumiasi Boys, thirdly, Butere High School. I'm greatly touched by this problem. And Mr. Speaker, the emerging issues, one of them is congestion. Mr. Speaker, when we brought about 100% enrollment in schools, you find that secondaries have over-enrolled, causing congestion. A school like Mukumu Girls, which should be hosting 1,000 students, is now hosting more than 2,000 students. So there is congestion in classrooms, congestion in dormitories, congestion in the use of all the facilities. And then secondly, Mr. Speaker, with this expansion, water management has not improved. You find that most schools use boreholes, and these boreholes, the water is not treated, Mr. Speaker. And you find that the water points are not enough for these students. And Mr. Speaker, you know water is life. Looking at the case of Mukumu, it has since been found that the water that they drink, Mr. Speaker, was mixed with the sewer. That is the report that I've just heard, and this is very sad. And so, Mr. Speaker, we need to look at the water systems.
Honorable Elsie Mwanda, is that a confirmed report, or it is something just said?
It is not a confirmed report. Okay. It is just passed on from the committee that has sat there, but nothing confirmed.
The procedure.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Another problem, Mr. Speaker, is the food supplies and preservation. Mr. Speaker, there is nobody there to test the moisture content of the maize, for example. You find that health officers do not visit these schools. They only visit these schools when we have a problem. And another emerging issue is the composition of boards. Mr. Speaker, there is no laid down regulation, or if there is, it is not followed. You find that the board members are not well constituted in many cases. You know, we need in the board, we need different experts in the board of schools. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, there is need for expansion of infrastructure in schools because of this congestion, and equally, there is need for schools to have a mandatory school nurse, for schools equally to be near maybe a health facility. Because if you look at the olden days, most schools were near some dispensary or some hospital. And also, Mr. Speaker, we need to improve our water systems. It should be mandatory that the water should be treated. And I just want to thank the Ministry of Health. This weekend, they visited Kakamega, and the minister said that they're going to bring some system that will be treating the water. We just thank them, but only that unfortunately it has come when
Honorable Gitonga Murugara, MP for Tharaka.
Yes. Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm happy you've actually reached me. This is the first time I'm debating while you're on the chair. I'm most grateful for that, absolutely. Mr. Speaker, this motion of adjournment is quite timely. And especially now, as the schools close, we know very well that some of them were forced to close because of such misfortunes as these unknown diseases that visited upon them. Also, as the schools close, it is important today we acknowledge that accidents are another issue that must be discussed at length. Schools, including school buses and matatus, where school children are being ferried, getting involved in accidents as a result of which we are losing lives. And it's unfortunate that I'm told just now that between Nakuru and Naivasha, there has been a traffic accident and the fatalities involve students. It's regrettable, it is totally discouraged, and as we speak, may we kindly appeal upon the traffic police officers in the country to be extra vigilant, especially when checking on vehicles that are transporting our children after schools close.
Is a new accident at the same spot or the previous one?
There is a previous one and a new one today. And this is absolutely unwelcome. Mr. Speaker, sir, we must really, as a country, relook at the issue of accidents, and especially involving school children, because these are young lives we are nipping in the bud. They've got a whole expanse of life ahead of them, and as a result of an accident, this is brought to an end. It's totally unwelcome. So, Speaker, as regards what these diseases are, one of the schools in this particular motion is Mukuni Boys High School in Tharaka-Nithi County. One of the best schools in our county. It performs very well, and it has a very large enrollment. It is extremely unfortunate that as we debate, the school closed prematurely because there were cases of suspected cholera in the school. The manner in which it was handled may be totally inappropriate, because if these were real cases of cholera, you cannot then send almost 1,000 or more than 1,000 students home, because you are visiting the disease on the homes itself. You are helping in the spreading instead of curbing it. So we should have devised a way of ensuring that those young students are properly quarantined and treated, checked, and they are safe to go home where they can mingle with the other citizens. But that is now a bygone, and we let it be and assume and pray that this was not cholera and it won't be visited upon those homes where the young ones went to. We need to develop a policy in this country on supply of water to schools, because maybe these diseases we are complaining about are waterborne. We've just come from a drought where water was one of the major issues on top of food, which we were discussing. So we are not very sure what the rains brought with them. Maybe this is the reason we are suffering. We must also look at food. We've said there must be a way of safeguarding food such that our children do consume food that is fit for human consumption. These are policies. As we develop that schools must have electricity, we must have policies on clean water for our schools and also clean food for our children. That way, we may actually be able to get away from such eventualities as we are now faced with. I do support the motion of adjournment.
Thank you, Chair, Justice and Legal Affairs Committee. You know what your committee should be doing around those issues. The Honorable MP for Samburu West, the Honorable Naisula Nesuda.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute to this very important motion of adjournment, and to thank Honorable Tindi Mwale for bringing it this afternoon. I would also like to take this opportunity to pass my sincere condolences to the families that have lost their loved ones in the said school, and to wish those that are still unwell a speedy recovery. Mr. Speaker, it is important for us as a nation, and I've said this very many times, to really value lives. Whether it is one life, it is 2 lives, 3 or 4. For us as a nation to really value the loss of even one single life. And it is very unfortunate that most of the time, especially when such tragedies happen, there's a lot of pointing fingers, a lot of blame games, a lot of who did not do what, who should have done what, Mr. Speaker. But if everybody just did their part and on time, I'm sure we would have saved more lives, Mr. Speaker. That issue first broke out on 1st of March. It is unfortunate that 2 weeks later is when we are seeing senior government officials visiting the school and even finding out what is really happening in that area. I think it is important that when something happens in this country, it is given the seriousness that it deserves, Mr. Speaker. There are a lot of issues that have been talked about, because I remember that it was reported in the social media that the principal of the school was actually accusing the media of just hyping the whole issue that was happening in the school, rather than taking up the matter as a serious matter where lives could actually have been lost. And it is very unfortunate for a parent to lose a child. When you send your child to school and you hope that you will see your child at the end of when the schools close, and you're told to come and pick your child, and there's been a lot of complaints for a very long time of parents saying that they have been called to schools to pick their children when they are critically ill. It is important that our schools inform the parents from the moment the child is taken ill, so that they can also make informed decisions on whether their children can actually seek further treatment, depending on the illness and how long that child has been sick, Mr. Speaker. The second issue is the whole issue to do with the overpopulation of our schools. It is unfortunate to see how overcrowded our schools are, Mr. Speaker. It is important that the amenities and the facilities that are put in our schools match the population that we have in our schools. And so from the time of admissions of our students, and also the availability of amenities like sick bays, the issues of water, clean food, all those issues should be looked at compared to the population in our schools, Mr. Speaker. The second thing that I would like to say, and I had mentioned on it, was the timeliness of always taking action when something happens in our schools. I wanted to mention also the issues of accidents, which Honorable Murugara has also talked about. Now that we are closing schools, we've just seen that we've lost 6 students, 4 others are injured this afternoon, and the issues of accidents has really gone up across the country. We've been losing up to 10, 15 people across the country. Those are really big numbers and huge numbers to lose in the country. I think it is important for the Department of Transport and those who are involved to look at what is really happening. We also have issues in our schools, Mr. Speaker, of children being beaten to a point where we have children having to go through very critical surgery in our schools. I think it is important that we know when we give our children to our schools that they take care of our children, and not parents being called to take their children when they are very sick and even being beaten to such lengths. Finally, as I conclude, Mr. Speaker, it is important for us to realize as a country that we have to punish mistakes and reward good work. This issue of transferring people when they have not done something good and taken to another school, what are you telling us? Are you telling us that you have done disciplinary action to whoever was supposed to have taken action? We've seen that a lot. We saw that in Mama Lucy Hospital yesterday, the people being transferred from one place to another. I think it is very good to work in government because no action is ever taken, but the whole issue of transfers also has to be looked at.
Thank you, Honorable Esuda. The Honorable Joanna Ngeno.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for also giving me this opportunity to ventilate into this matter, which is of great national importance. Mr. Speaker, I know even the pain the parents are going through, the parents of these particular young ones who are in school. And I would wish first, before saying anything, to condole with them, those ones who've lost their loved ones, and also give them a word of encouragement that this House and those who are concerned with the Speaker should take very serious steps in ensuring that such a happening do not happen again in this country. Mr. Speaker, I think the reason, there could be so many other reasons why we have such a kind of diseases in our schools, Mr. Speaker. But I think the most important part of it is to have at least a health facility in every school. I remember even the schools we used to go, Mr. Speaker, used to have some serious dispensary in the school, a serious nurse, a serious doctor, so that if there was any particular disease in the school, it can be detected immediately. I remember the school I was in, Mr. Speaker, which is Maseno High School, used to have a very serious outbreak of malaria. And at some point, we lost even a student out of that, Mr. Speaker. But eventualities that happened after that, Mr. Speaker, was the introduction of a very serious dispensary in the school, a serious doctor, a serious nurse, who would actually take care of any disease that come up in the school, Mr. Speaker. It should not be, we should not, having deaths more than 2, more than 3, Mr. Speaker, in a school is a very dangerous phenomenon. I think one of the most contributors to this particular situation, Mr. Speaker, is either water, which is contaminated, food, which is not properly cooked. And sometimes I remember, Mr. Speaker, there was a time when we woke up in the morning to realize that the tea we were taking had some dead cockroaches and not even cockroaches, dead rats inside, Mr. Speaker. You can imagine that. You can imagine how these students are, what these students are going through. And we need to have a very serious health people who check on what food these students are eating. Just like what the government does, Mr. Speaker, where we have the public health inspecting food which are sold in the butcheries or sold in the hotels. We should also have the same kind of personalities inspecting the food that are cooked in these particular schools, Mr. Speaker. You know, when you cook for a large number of students, sometimes you just overlook some other things. You end up cooking rats and cockroaches, and some other stuff, Mr. Speaker, which I don't even want to mention. I just want to say we must put a very serious measures to ensure that whatever these students are eating in schools are properly inspected, and even the cooks who are cooking inside there should be people who have undergone a rigorous training on matters of food and cooking, Mr. Speaker. The other issue also is water, Mr. Speaker. Most of the water that are piped into these schools, Mr. Speaker, just like what I've heard from one of the members, is that there could be even some connection between that water and the sewage, sewer lines, so that these students drink very extremely contaminated water. Mr. Speaker, I think we should take very serious measures against it. I also wish to talk about the accidents which have been happening along our roads, especially that are affecting our students. Speaker, that one we need to tell our drivers to be very, very careful. Mr. Speaker, also when I left school, we had a very beautiful bus, but 2 years later, we were told the bus got an accident and it completely crashed to zero. Fortunately enough, there were no students in that bus. We need to retrain our drivers, especially those who are carrying our students, to be extremely careful. But most importantly, Mr. Speaker, let us pray for our children. There has been so many happenings around our children. Let us.
Dr. James Nyikala, MP for Seme.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity. Mr. Speaker, this is an extremely important issue we are discussing today. Cholera cases in 4 schools from different parts of the country. Typhoid in a school where 3 people have died. And in Butere, a known disease, but mostly diarrhea and vomiting. Mr. Speaker, why I say this is a national problem is not an incident that has occurred in one place. We are talking of a widespread breakdown of public health systems because all these diseases are waterborne. They have to do with sanitation, they have to do with food safety, they have to do with water supply. So it's across the board. So we are not talking for those schools. And Mr. Speaker, there are well laid down systems of inspection of public eating places. That is, schools are public eating places. Hotels and restaurants are public eating places. They should be regularly inspected. There should be regular inspection of places where food is sold, in markets, in butcheries. Mr. Speaker, we should ensure that water that is consumed publicly is safe. You may not know, but even Nairobi has a big problem with water. Nairobi is actually rationing water, which means we don't have enough water. And you have seen that people are actually buying water. When you buy water with these tanks, do you know the source of that water? So we are dealing with a very serious issues that we have here. Food handlers, whether they're in hotels, whether they're in schools, should be regularly examined and certified as disease-free. Mr. Speaker, are these things going on? And Mr. Speaker, worse still, when there's a disease outbreak in a community, in an institution, and we suspect or know that this is an infectious disease that can spread, rule number one, you don't close the place and then send these people away to spread the disease across the country. Now, in the case where Honorable Ngara was talking about, the kids were sent away. In Mukumu, the kids were sent away. So it's not just, we have a problem, a national problem of public health. A mistake was made in one part of the country, a similar mistake is made in another part of the country. We are all not safe. So I think we must call upon the national government to collaborate with the county governments. I know there must be an issue there on who is in charge. Disease surveillance at the national level, I know that is where it belongs, to monitor across the country. Typhoid is a reportable disease. Cholera is a reportable disease. If one is reported somewhere, action should be taken. Where did it come from? Have this been done? So, Mr. Speaker, I think we have a national problem that we must address. There must be collaboration between the national government and the county government, research institutions, so that there is safety, food safety across the country, water safety across the country, safety in the market, safety in the restaurant. This, we have no option. So I thank Honorable Member for bringing this matter in. But I must call upon the Ministry of Health to support the county governments. They may not have this capacity, and I think there may be still an issue of who holds responsibility, county government or national government, when we are talking of public health in local places. It does not matter. The responsibility will still lie with the Ministry of Health. And the county governments must be willing and seek help at the first instance of an outbreak of a disease. With that, Mr. Speaker, I support this motion of adjournment and call upon the government to actually come out, the national government and the county government, to ensure our safety and the safety of our children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. Is the Chair Education Committee in the House?
Yes, yes.
As the Health Ministry reported to you what killed our girls in Mukumu girls?
Yes, thank you.
Please make your contributions as you respond to
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I rise to support this adjournment motion. Honorable Speaker, as you rightly directed, they have not actually reported to our committee, and we have actually asked the CS and the PS to really give us a detailed report of what happened on the issue of Mukumu girls, Butere girls, and other schools across the country. But, Honorable Speaker, I rise because this is a very, very important motion for this House and for this country. It puts a wake-up call to two ministries, the Ministry of Public Health and Medical Services and the Ministry of Education. Honorable Speaker, this age and time when you have cholera in our institutions is quite disturbing. It's actually a case of negligence. And I think members of the public, members of parliament who are here will get to know that cholera is a case of that, it is a case of poor hygiene, it is a case of poor handling. And Honorable
member for Seme, Honorable Nyikal, our renowned doctor in the House, has rightly put it and argued that every ministry, every government department knows it very clearly that where we have eateries, and schools are actually abodes where we have a lot of eateries, there need to be regular inspections on the hygiene in the school. Who slept on the job and why this has actually cost the life of 3 or 4 girls, several students, is quite not good, Honorable Speaker. I just wanted to say this, that schools and institutions for the last 5 years has been receiving hundreds of thousands of students in what we call 100% transition. The 100% transition has stretched our institutions beyond limit. Honorable Speaker, if you go across the country today, you look that over the weekend I was in one of our top girls' schools in my county. And the principal and everybody was saying they have converted the libraries, the labs to be dormitories. Every other open space, so that actually the government can actually hold on to the 100% transition. It means that the issue that we have at Mukumu and the other institutions is actually a tip of the iceberg. We have a serious problem, and the government needs to wake up, needs to fund these schools, or we need to agree and say we cannot take more students in, for the sake of their lives, for the sake of their health, and for the sake of the future generations, instead of cramming them in this what we call schools, to an extent that now most of these institutions are time bomb for our institutions, for our children. If you go to an institution where a dining hall is supposed to hold 500 boys or girls, the school now is hosting 1,600 students. Where will they eat? What kind of cooking facilities are they having? And I think it was in the public domain when you saw the kind of kitchen that was in that particular school. It was a kitchen built in the 60s, in the 70s, and actually this is something that we need to cover. So, Honorable Speaker, I want to say this, that as a Committee of Education, we have actually, the ministry needs to come out very clearly to cap this issue. And the Ministry of Health, when we are told there was a known disease in Butere, it's quite not convincing with this day and age of research, science, and all these others. And two, we really need to come out and tell our officers in the field to take up the issue of inspection, checking the quality of teaching, of meals, quality of living conditions, and even the quality of our dormitories, and even the quality of our kitchens, and even where the students are, the toilets, the toiletries, and all these problems. These are actually a serious problem. We really need to take it up, and I want to say it is actually very, very...
I would have added you a minute or two if you had requested for as Chair for Education, but we thank you for your contribution because you've concluded. Where is the Honorable John Kaguchia, the MP for Mukuruyeni?
Thank you, Honorable Chair. I want to appreciate that once again I get your attention this afternoon or this evening. The last time I had your attention, I also had your interrogation. I hope today I will not be interrogated by the Chair. Honorable Chair, as I thank you, I want to focus on the issue.
Honorable Kaguchia, the Chair only intervenes when it is a matter of national importance. Like the question I was asking the Chair Education was a critical question to know whether he has information as the Chair of the relevant committee what killed our students.
Honorable Chair, why I like you,
you have your liberty.
Why I like you, Honorable Chair, is because you're the most engaging chair we have in this assembly, and we appreciate. Honorable Chair, once again, I also want to rise on the issue of public health concern in our schools, an issue that has caught us by surprise. And I'm not sure whether it's so much surprise, because this has been a problem that has been building up and it has always been a bomb in waiting. And when we find ourselves now in this situation, I think as a country we really have ourselves to blame. Honorable Speaker, the bacteria that has been found to be affecting our young people has been identified by the medics as Escherichia coli. Sometimes it's called E. coli. And of course, the other one that has been identified to be affecting our children by the medics is the Salmonella typhi. And these bacteria are bacteria that the doctors will tell you they are mainly infections which are based on hygiene. I had a discussion earlier on with the honorable member here about the typhoid and cholera outbreaks. These are diseases that are generally and are known to be third world diseases and infections. They are infections that are affecting our children because of hygienic conditions that they are living in schools. Honorable Speaker, as we are saying this, I want to call your attention to the many policies that we have had in this country that deal with the issue of public health in our schools. We have had a national schools health policy that was developed in the Ministry of Public Health and Ministry of Education before. We have had a Kenya Comprehensive School Health Policy that has also been developed. Honorable Speaker, as recent as 2018, we had another school health policy that was also developed by the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education. And all these policies that we have developed have generally not been implemented in our schools. And for that reason, we find ourselves in a situation where our students are suffering because of errors of commission and omission by our administrators and even by ourselves. Honorable Speaker, we might speak about deaths in schools as if it's something which is far-fetched or which is very far from us. Honorable Speaker, without giving much details, I know that we have also had members of parliament in this house in the recent times admitted in hospital with cholera infections. That is a fact, and that has happened recently. Honorable Speaker, we are talking about the students, but even in this house, we are affected. Why are we affected? Issues of sanitation. Sometimes we may blame the problems of congestion in our schools, infrastructure in our schools, but some of these issues are coming because of not following laid down procedures and codes of operations, especially when it comes to the issue of health. And that has been a big problem. Honorable Speaker, we have the school health inspectorates that is supposed to be conducted by the Ministry of Health, and this has also now been domiciled in our county government. Are they doing their work? Honorable Speaker, the answer is no. We no longer have these inspections. We no longer have the impromptu inspections in our schools, and this department is like it has died a natural death. And even when we have these inspections, what happens? The inspectors who go to the schools have their hands greased to look the other way, even when they find that issues of sanitation, issues of hygiene are not carefully taken care of. Honorable Speaker, it's high time as an assembly we took action. We ensured that there is implementation, enforcement of these rules, enforcement of our health and
You'll be given 30 seconds.
Honorable Speaker, thank you very much for graciously giving me 30 seconds. And I want to urge this National Assembly to, through the ministry of, or through our committee, the Health Committee and the Education Committee, to do a proper investigation of this case and a proper investigation of the policies that have already been developed in this country. Because we don't need to develop new policies because we already have policies. We have laws, we have the Act. Honorable Speaker, let us have a report in this House which is going to be done by the Committee of Education and Committee of Health, the Health Committee, giving proper report on what is being done and what should be done in our schools so that we can avert these deaths, Honorable Speaker. Our children are dying, not only from hygienic problems, from accidents, from mental health issues. A lot of suicides now happening in schools, and a lot of from corporal punishment in schools. Honorable Speaker, we can't watch our children die in schools as we sit in this honorable house without taking action. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Fatuma Jeo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute. Is this better? Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this opportunity to contribute to this motion of adjournment to discuss matter of national importance. And the matter in this case is outbreak of disease in our schools. First, Mr. Speaker, I would like to pass my condolences to the parents who lost their kids in school. Mr. Speaker, all of us are parents here. And for 1 minute, everyone here, I would like them to just imagine taking your kids to school when the term starts and just be called to come and collect their bodies. It's really sad. It's not something we can think of. And in that regard, I really want to take this opportunity to ask the CS Health, together with the Education CS, to actually tell us what happened in these schools. Today we are talking of 4 or 5 schools, Mr. Speaker. Within no time, we'll be talking of all the schools in this country. I am saying that, Mr. Speaker, because all of us schooled within the boundaries of Kenya, and we know all the issues that have been discussed here. People talked of uncooked food. Everyone knows how many times we ate those uncooked githeris in high school, Mr. Speaker.
Is that Honorable Millie Odhiambo? Oh, sorry, she's left the house.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, we talked of contaminated water, and I heard you asking the other member whether it was confirmed. I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, with no iota of doubt, that the water the school-going kids take are contaminated. We all went through those. The food handlers, Mr. Speaker, we know the kind of shoes they wore. We know the kind of coats they wore, Mr. Speaker. And it's not once or twice that we ate tea and the food that was cooked with cockroaches, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we talked of sanitation. If we were just to sample a school near this parliament today, there is no doubt that we will find that. Poor sanitation. Mr. Speaker, all the schools in this country, when we go, there's a nurse. There's a health sector, we are told, and then there's a small, one nurse that sits somewhere, Mr. Speaker. I want to tell the CS Health to upgrade the nurse or the health centers they give to high schools. It's not enough. They only bring Panadols, and that is old. This death, if we had proper health centers in the secondary schools, I can assure you we could have avoided. Mr. Speaker, they say prevention is better than cure. There's no point of the CS visiting those schools and coming back at the end of the day. What have they done, Mr. Speaker? We want a report on what happened, what has been done. I don't know whether it will be right to tell them in the next 1 week, Mr. Speaker. We have lost over 5, and we cannot stand here to lose more kids. As a parent, it's devastating, and I support this motion, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Fatuma Jeo. The Member of Parliament for Elgeyo Marakwet County, the Honorable Ngelichei Caroline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for granting me this opportunity. First, let me thank the Member of Parliament for bringing the motion of adjournment. Mr. Speaker, we are sad because when children suffer, it means that those with the responsibility of taking care of them have absconded their responsibility in one way or another. Mr. Speaker, lately we've had issues, so many issues, and even I appreciate and I thank God because they are closing school and they are just closing school. Mr. Speaker, I think there has been a negligence in schools, especially boarding school, and I think many schools nowadays, Mr. Speaker, are focusing on making money or having parents pay for other issues, the issues of the welfare of teachers and other non-teaching staff, and forgetting to take care of the children. Mr. Speaker, you find that in a school, if there is an outbreak of a disease or if there is something that is not known, it takes several days before it is reported to the parents who are actually the responsible people. What makes the school take this long? It's because many schools, Mr. Speaker, don't actually, they are not what they are. Many schools are just presenting a very nice face value. You might find even some of these schools, they don't have enough sanitation within the school compound. Some of these schools, there is one school, I cannot name it, but Mr. Speaker, you find that they are no longer using treated water. They are using water collected from the water tanks, or they are being transported, they fetch water from the rivers, simply because they no longer maybe pay the bills, or they are tired of doing the same thing. Mr. Speaker, this issue of schools, and I want to appreciate the chair of education because he's here. I think it is about time that we no longer look at schools or measure the schools by the capacity of beds available, by the number of desks and classrooms available. You find, Mr. Speaker, that a school that is meant to accommodate 500 students is now accommodating 1,000, 1,500 shillings. Do you want to tell me that is the interest of that teacher? No, it is the interest of the pocket. How much are these students going to pay in terms of remedial? You find that we are being told by the ministry many a times, Mr. Speaker, that their parents should not be charged an extra fee. But I know many members of this house are parents in various schools.
Was out of order, Honorable Mbokomlem.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. The matter we are dealing with is matter of death of our children. And the Honorable Member is on his feet, indicating that the congestion in schools is courtesy of people lining up their pockets. Honorable Speaker, the 100% transition as spoken about by the chair of the Education Committee has completely pushed the schools and they're bursting. Is it in order for an honorable member to imagine that it's just the teachers who want more schools, more students in schools? Yet the 100% policy has moved Mukumu from 900 to 2,800. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
Were you talking about private schools or public schools?
I wish he gave me enough time to finish it, but you know, once a teacher, always a teacher. The honorable member was an activist for teachers, and he wouldn't want anyone to say anything about that. But what I'm trying to say, I'm not castigating teachers per se.
Honorable Omboko Mlemba remains the chair of KUPPET.
I know.
Which is the union in charge of post-primary teachers. And you remember in the tragedy we are talking about, a teacher, or how many, also died. The question is, were you talking about private schools or public schools?
All of them.
And the point is making is that for public schools, the numbers are not about the teachers seeking them, but they are being taken there because of the implementation of that policy is talking about. So kindly clarify.
Thank you. Now you've wasted my time. I think you're going to help me add more time.
The Speaker will never waste your time. Make your contribution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, what I was trying to say before the honorable member diverted our attention is some of these challenges are realized because of the overpopulation in schools. You find that there is overutilization, or the resources.
Give her 30 seconds to conclude our contributions.
Yeah, where I was headed to is At times you find that a school which was supposed to accommodate 500 students might be having one school nurse. But now that it has 1,500 students, they still operate with one nurse. Or you find that the number of, or the sanitation or the water in the school has not increased. The volume of water used in the school has not increased. So it has a relationship with the increased number of students in schools, whereby what I want to say is the Ministry of Education should also work hard to increase the infrastructure in these number of schools. And we shouldn't rush so much in making, increasing the number of beds before we increase other resources that are very important, like the sanitation, the food. We ensure that the food and the hygiene of the kitchen of these students is improved. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. The Honorable Omboko Milemba, MP for MY.
Let me begin by apologizing. I had to make that point of order. Let me send my condolences to the families of the affected families and the school. The schools involved, Honorable Speaker, among others include Hasoko, include Mukumu, Butere. By the time I left Western, there was some problem also brewing around Chavakali. Honorable Speaker, when you look at these schools, they are in the same region. Honorable Speaker, all these schools are very old schools. They are old schools. They are not new schools. Also, all the schools affected, generally, when you look at them, are boarding schools. And that sends a signal of certain character of these schools, including the congestion that I just spoke about. Honorable Speaker, there must be a breakdown that has happened between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health. Because within the Ministry of Education, there is what we call school health policy. The school health policy, which was reversed in 2018, has the mandate of making sure that there's water, hygiene, sanitation, and related diseases do not arise in our schools. Number two, this particular department has the task of making sure that there's collaboration between the line ministries and stakeholders to make sure that there's health and sanitation in our schools. Further, it is given the mandate of providing adequate capital both from the national and county governments to promote water supplies in the schools. Further, Honorable Speaker, it has the mandate of training personnel, which I had somebody speak about, personnel to oversee the implementation of all these things that it has to do. But this one, I must not forget it. It has further the task of creating awareness in schools on prudent management of water resources. This is where we have gone wrong. The Ministry of Education, and that breakdown between the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Health is what has led to this. And I heard one of the members speak on this, that up to now, we even don't know the disease that caused the death of students in Mukumu and all the other environs, and the schools included. Yet the Minister of Health is not even giving this country an update on a daily basis about what is going on, about the discovery of that reason for death, given that several students are still in schools, in hospitals. Yesterday, a number of them, one of them was still on oxygen. But the Minister of Health is just quiet. What about the Minister of Education? The Minister of Education, which has continuously pushed students to schools without expanding them, without expanding facilities, like the honorable member who spoke just before me said, that we have not increased the supply of water to Mukumu. We have not increased the supply of staff to Mukumu, but we have made sure that there are more students in these schools, and these schools are boarding. Telling you, Honorable Speaker, the boarding schools are being pushed to the threshold, and they are just starting to burst or have busted. And this is just an iceberg of what, a tip of the iceberg of what we shall see. It's high time that the chairman of Education Committee seated here, you call the Minister for Education and any other stakeholder, even if it's the Minister of Health, so that they may give a proper report. You don't intervene after the death of students by rushing to a school and sacking the board and the head. The head teacher who was sacked is a teacher of literature and English. And she can only use this to interpret what happened in the book that we also teach in literature about enemy of the people, where there's a Dr. Stockman who realizes there's dirt in water but people cannot see. So that head who was sacked, there was no need of sacking him. There was no need of harassing the board, because the real problem lies with the Minister of Education and the Minister of Health. In fact, they should restate that principle and go for the real reason why we are losing our students. Finally, Honorable Speaker, the boarding schools menace must be addressed, because we shall continue having these challenges and they arise from the boarding schools, which are congested, and we need to actually decongest those schools.
Thank you, Honorable Mboko Milengba. The Honorable Martin Owino, the MP from there.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And from the onset, I really want to say that I support this motion, and I thank Honorable Tindi Mwale for bringing this up. Mr. Speaker, as a public health specialist and a member of the Health Committee, I'm really saddened on what is going on. Because from independence, we had 3 things which we were to relieve our citizens from: disease, literacy, and poverty. But unfortunately, now we have even added 2, corruption and tribalism. So now we have 5. Mr. Speaker, I want to castigate the Department of Public Health. Our honorable member said here that we have so many policies and regulations, but nobody is implementing this to the latter so that we can save our children. Why we lost those children, and to bring a child up to that level and lose him or her is tragic. But why we have done that is the underlying factors, which are public health issues. Well, some have been mentioned here. Provision of the basics, water, shelter, and all this. Sanitation. Overcrowding, Mr. Speaker, in our schools is a public health offense. And we have CAP 242, which addresses this. The health officers and technicians should have taken action long time ago to close down the schools which are overcrowded. So saying that we had 100% transition as a cause does not arise. We have laws and policies to wake up the government, which is sleeping. The food preps and food handlers, routine checks, is a must, because that is where we have all these diseases, cholera, typhoid, E. coli, and salmonella is coming from. But if they are checked routinely and they have certificate to show every time, that can be a prevention. Initially, even after independence, Mr. Speaker, we did have the matrons and nurses in charge of school health. That also died. And there was a provision that each sub-location should have a dispensary, and at location level we should have a health center which is equipped to quickly isolate all these pathogens and be dealt with. That also subsided. I appeal to our county government health department, even as we close the schools now, Honorable Mboko Malemba, these kids being released to the community should be screened, because if it doesn't, they will transfer all these pathogens to their families and fellow children. So this can fail as it has failed, but Mr. Speaker, when things fail and disease comes in, then there is standard public health approach to do it. Number 1, immediate response, which also brings in the Ministry of Roads to ease evacuation. All our schools must be connected with better roads if evacuation is reached. Number 2, in medicine, there's a language which says, even if you are doing triaging, you have to stable a patient. You don't close the school and release them to transfer pathogens to other areas. You stable the patient. You go in, even if it means you have to put a field hospital, you have to do it. That did not happen. So county government should be responsible. The national government should be responsible for disease surveillance so that we can know the trend of diseases and warn the entities accordingly. Lastly, education does not, this disease does not affect only the medical part of it. There's also education outcome. How about those kids who are traumatized because the loss of the others, the PTSD? When they come, their score will be low. So we are dealing here with a crisis. My time is gone, but I think the Ministry of Health and the county government is called to action. And as a member of Committee of Health, I think with education, we need to have intersectoral kind of arrangement and address this. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honorable Martin Oino Peters. Honorable Beatrice Kemei, Member of Parliament for Kericho County.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me this chance to contribute and support the motion of adjournment to discuss this very important issue that is concerning education sector and more so our children in schools. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the honorable member who actually came with this motion. To start with, Mr. Speaker, it is very sad. I want to join the members of this National Assembly. I also want to join other people and especially the teachers, parents, to mourn the students we lost, the teacher who was actually lost, whom we lost in line of duty. It is very sad, very, very unfortunate. Having been a teacher and in this sector for 20 years, I feel and I empathize with the teaching fraternity for the same. So may I convey my message of condolence to the bereaved families. Mr. Speaker, the cause of death of these dear students and the teacher, which when we come around, we are like, is it contaminated food? Is it the water? Is it actually something that is unknown? I want us to I want us to take this one seriously, that the Ministry of Education, together with the Ministry of Health, and especially public health, should actually come out very strong and let us have the report on the real cause. It has taken very long, 2 weeks down the line, and we're just waiting and wondering what the cause is. And it has been rightly put by the Chair Education and the other members. We are waiting for this report about the cause of these deaths. But however, from the reports, the primary reports, contaminated water, contaminated food, being the cause, should actually be prevented. Mr. Speaker, as it has been put very clearly, the infrastructural facilities in our schools are so much fixed. We appreciate the Ministry of Education, the 100% transition. It has positive impact on our students, on our society. But the impact, the negative impact on our infrastructure is what is one of the causes of this, and contamination of food and even sanitation, Mr. Speaker. I'm very particular with sanitation, and more importantly, when it comes to girls. I'm just trying to comprehend even where they dispose their sanitary, their used parts. So, Mr. Speaker, the ministries should still go back and look at the way this sanitation is used. We have what we call the quality assurance officers. I don't know how many times they go around the schools to check on the nature of the schools, to check on the state of the schools. This is a wake-up call. It is not only affecting those specific schools in Kakamega, but it is affecting all of us. So the ministry should come out very, very strong. And Mr. Speaker, I would also ask all of us parents that as the children come home, they have closed school, I still feel that we can do some deworming on them, be taken for checkup and maybe screening so that the issues of the same can actually be sorted. Accidents is a problem that we've just had. I plead with the road users to be careful, and especially with our children. And I ask the school administration, especially the teachers, to not to delay whenever there's an issue in school, and especially when it comes to the case.
Give her 15 seconds to end.
Thank you, thank you. Mr. Speaker, I was just putting across this point that the principals and the teachers should not also downplay the issues of health. Sometimes we imagine that students are faking the sickness because they want to be in the sick pay or they want to go home. So that is why sometimes the teachers take long to maybe to act. I ask them not to take chances because this is serious. It is a matter of life and death. And when it happens, it is the teachers, it is the parents who feel the pain. Thank you.
The Member of Parliament for the Dagoretti North. Chance passed. The Honorable Dr. Naomi Wako, Member of Parliament for Marsabit County and Deputy Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir, for giving me this opportunity to make my contribution to this motion of adjournment, as I also appreciate Honorable Member who brought it to the House. Mr. Speaker, it is a very unfortunate state that we are in and we are discussing. And before I go far, I want to condone with the parents and the families affected, because I know some students lost their lives, and we've also lost a teacher in this whole thing. I also know very well that there are students who are hospitalized and the parents are struggling with them. And so we wish them quick recovery, as we also condone with the parents who lost their loved ones. Mr. Speaker, it is unfortunate that in today's world, at this particular time, as a country, we are experiencing this in our boarding schools, which clearly says something on the quality of the services or of what happens in those schools. Some years ago, we overcrowded our public schools, and the private schools were able to grow, and anybody who was able to pay privately for their children was able to take their child or their children to private schools where they could get quality education. And unfortunately, our public schools remained crowded and with poor facility, teachers not even motivated, and the standard of performance and everything came down. And today, we know very well in all our public high schools, and especially the boarding schools, the quality of services they receive, the infrastructure, and what the students go through is sometimes what you do not want even to imagine of. So we know very well that the students are suffering and they have nothing much to do. The parents, of course, with the competition and the few spaces that are there, you have to just take your child to available space. And so it is unfortunate that we are talking about this today, and I urge the Ministry of Education to give this proper attention as it deserves and see how best we can improve. The students are going home. For the next 2 weeks, the schools will be closed. And while they're at home, it is high time for the management and the ministry to see how best the facilities can be improved. And when we were growing up, the public health used to do the inspection of all the schools. It is high time for that to be done. You know, these days people practice corruption everywhere, and sometimes they can even do fake reports without visiting the schools. And so it is high time now for the people concerned to do the inspections and to give the necessary reports so that any improvement that needs to be done can be done. Again, the cooks and those people who are serving our students in boarding schools should go also for medical checkups so that they can be in good health to serve our children. We also know very well that there are those service providers, the people who provide or supply food, and the quality of food supplied should also be tested and some standards be put in place so that we are sure of what our children eat. Mr. Speaker, we also know through accidents we are losing our students. A lot of care has to be taken. Many things that need to be put in place in terms of the vehicles that they use, the drivers that are employed, all that has to be put in place. I know my time is moving, and
I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. First, I want to thank the mover, our colleague, Tade Mwale, for bringing this motion. And at the same time, I want to send my sincere condolences to all the parents and the schools and the classmates of all the children who are passed on. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. I just want to ask a question, but I don't need an answer, is who is to blame? Mr. Speaker, we have spoken about the relationship between the Minister of Education and the Minister of Health. But I think there is also another problem that we are having, and that's where the teachers are falling victim of these failures. There is a problem of school management because there's a tug of war between the ministry and the TSC. Mr. Speaker, you know, a long time, you used to have school inspectors, which was a team from the Ministry of Health and also from the Ministry of Education. This inspectorate unit died off, and nobody seemed to have taken care of. Mr. Speaker, when we talk about negligence, there is a war between the teachers, the principal, or the entity teacher, and the Minister of Education. The Minister of Education is in charge of management of the school. Whenever they point out there is a problem in the schools, what normally happens is the TSC comes with the defense of the teacher and vice versa. And that's where the problem starts, Mr. Speaker. I want to say this. We have spoken about sanitation. It's very unfortunate to note that a lot of washrooms for our schools are still the pit latrines in this era. So what do you expect? Percolation of water from the toilet to the mainstream supply of water, either on the streams or where the pipes are broken. Mr. Speaker, I want to say this. We need a lot of fumigation for our schools. We saw a lot of fumigation taking place during the COVID times, and it died off. And that's where we started now losing some fight against some diseases. Mr. Speaker, we need a continuous medical examination for our children, the teachers, and the support staff. This is very important if we are to arrest the situation as it is right now. Mr. Speaker, we need more money put into our education institutions. I will say this without fear of contradiction, that for the last 10 years, the government has spent a lot of time developing road infrastructure, other infrastructures, but spared very limited resources in terms of the infrastructure for our schools. And at this point, I would like to say this. It's the high time that some schools are divided into different sub-schools within the same institution, such that we don't strain only one person managing, trained and managing 200 or 500 students. But now you have increased the number to 1,500. It is very unfair to target that principal or that teacher. We need to look at the capacity of this person in a crowded environment. What are we doing? What are we saying? We are letting the school management down as a government, and we must come up with a policy to see every principal or any teacher must manage up to this number of pupils or students. Mr. Speaker, I think it is also not good to continue bashing our teachers. I propose that we have mobile clinics for every sub-county to take care of our medical requirement for our peoples. I also say this, we allow the registration of more schools. I think it is very important. We have been preventing from building more schools, and it is now becoming a problem. Mr. Speaker, you realize that we have no even sporting facilities. We are having children crowding classrooms. They have no ventilation. These people have no space to go and play and enjoy themselves and build up their bodies. So we are dealing with a not very healthy population of pupils and students. It means, therefore, we need to really look at also sporting requirement, because if some of these guys are healthy doing sport, they might not be able to.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. And I want to thank our colleague, Honorable Tindi Mule, for moving this motion. Mr. Speaker, a visit to most of our institutions will reveal that the number of sanitation facilities available for our students in the schools are highly outmatched by the numbers. Virtually in every institution, the sanitation facilities are inadequate. In terms of standards, quality standards in our schools, the public health officers rarely visit our schools. Yet the Ministry of Education has a quality assurance department with officers. But this department at the Ministry of Education only collects money when they visit the principals of the schools. And therefore, they keep grossing over, glaring inefficiencies and inadequacies in our institutions. I think, Mr. Speaker, that this crisis, unfortunate as it is, should serve as a wake-up call, that it is time that we had a task force that goes around our schools and inspects the facilities that are available in terms of both boarding, sanitation, classroom sizes versus the numbers of students. There is a scrabble by school administrators to attract as many number of students to the institutions without looking at the available infrastructure in competition for capitation from the Ministry of Education. Most of our dining halls, Mr. Speaker, in our schools have a characteristic smell that informs us of the suboptimal hygienic conditions in our institutions. There is a crave to even convert existing schools into boarding schools. Most of the schools are in the new business of providing food in schools. Yet, we have no standards, we have no coherent policy on food purchase, food storage, food preparation, even the standard for the kitchens where the food are prepared, all the food handlers and food preparation. When you look at the cleaning area, were the utensils that our students are using in our schools, you find it is completely unhygienic and a fertile ground for disease manifestation. When we go to the health clinics or the school clinics and do a mere inspection of the drug catalog, you will find that there is a very high turnover of use of medication that is associated with stomach upsets, diarrhea, hyperacidity, and food poisoning. So the red flag has been with us for some time. This is a wake-up call. This unfortunate crisis must serve as a wake-up call for all of us to wake up and act. And I therefore, when I thank our colleague for this motion, I urge this House that we must go beyond the talk and the passage of the motions. Mr. Speaker, in my few months in this House, we had a motion on the policy of feeding in our schools. Yet, we did pass the motion, nothing has happened. Now this crisis is with us. This House must become more forceful in terms of the registration. And I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the kind of guidance that you keep giving us, the young legislators, in terms of how to get the business of this.
The Member of Parliament for Samburu East, the Honorable Jackson de Komuntari.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker, for this chance. I want to, first of all, to condole with the families of the students we have lost and even the teacher. Mr. Speaker, I think many issues have been raised, and I want to say, Mr. Speaker, our schools have serious issues. And Mr. Speaker, we cannot ignore the issue of infrastructure in our schools. And I think almost all schools have a very big number of students due to what many members have said, 100% transition. And I remember, Mr. Speaker, one time, Minister for Education said, telling the principals, I want you to admit all of them, put in the tent, and tell me they are in the tent. So, Mr. Speaker, this issue has been there. And I think, Mr. Speaker, our principals and teachers are really trying. I sympathize with the principal who was chased away by the minister and even the board. Mr. Speaker, I watched that principal in one of the functions, I think the burial of one of the students. And the principal was saying, if it could have been possible for me to give my life to my daughters, I could have given. But Mr. Speaker, that is not the right target to be targeted. I think the Ministry of Education should wake up. If they are really serious about this 100% transition, then they have to provide support even the members of parliament who are funding the schools. Otherwise, in some of the constituencies, the schools are even few, such that there are nowhere the student can go. So we just have to have those students there if really we need to support them. And it is not the issue of even the school fees. Mr. Speaker, in some other areas, the parents are not even able to pay the school fees. So the issue of the school fees is not there. I think this issue of congestion and the facilities, sanitation and all that, it is the big issue we need to address. And I think the Ministry of Education has a huge budget. They have to come in and support these schools. If at all we have to help the student. And Mr. Speaker, it is very embarrassing to see we are losing young lives just like that, and the minister wake up and go and chase the board and the principal without solving the problem. I support this motion. We have to work together. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honorable Mary Masi.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to contribute to this adjournment motion as a matter of national concern. Mr. Speaker, you know, when we bid our children farewell with a hug and love in the morning, it's our hope that school is a safe space. When you send your child to boarding school, it is our hope and belief and trust that that is the safest place for our children. Mr. Speaker, what has happened in Mukumu is sad and very painful. And I think it's a wake-up call to the Ministry of Health, to the Ministry of Education, and to us leaders. And probably it is just a symptom or a warning of something more bigger, brewing and waiting to explode. Mr. Speaker, I want to agree with members who have alluded to the fact of overcrowding in schools. There is serious over-enrollment, and that automatically compromises quality of many things, health, sanitation included, that has deteriorated in a number of these schools. And Mr. Speaker, I want to differ with the argument that overcrowding in these schools has been caused because of the 100% transition or because of the need for more schools. Because, Mr. Speaker, there is an ending appetite in some of the schools in this country to continue to over-enroll, even in circumstances where there is inadequate capacity to accommodate these students. You will find in some dormitories 3-decker beds. And you know, when disaster strikes, Mr. Speaker, the damage is bigger, it's immense, it's more painful. Most of those schools over-enroll so as to attract capitation because of more numbers, so they'll attract more capitation from the ministry. And some of these schools is because, I want to call it a fallacy, that the school is doing better in terms of performance, even when we know that some of these schools are practicing exam cheating. So you'll find more parents preferring to take children to these particular schools, yet I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, even in my own constituency, I have some very good schools with very good facilities. If you go to that school, you wonder what is wrong. The population is not even a quarter of full capacity of that school. Because students, because of the perception that school A is doing better, most parents have all taken children to school A. So that school A is overcrowded. And I think this is a matter the Ministry of Education must take seriously. Carry out an audit, do a report, see how to rationalize. How do we improve performance in other schools so that we spread and there is no overcrowding in certain particular schools? And Mr. Speaker, that takes me to the question of standards. This country is not in short supply of standard legislation or policy. The problem is in enrollment. In the case of Mukumu, I want to say someone slept on the job. Do they care where the water comes from? What's the source of the water? Do they care whether if it is borehole water, is this water tested? Do they care where the food is coming from? Do they care whether the chef is trained or not trained? So basically we are saying something has to be done about enforcement so that we have standards enforced and maintained. If you
10 seconds. 10 seconds. We have so many members waiting to contribute. Members contributing or having the chance, I would request to use even less than the time you are given.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, this takes me to the issue of the hospitals.
How well equipped are our hospitals? How prepared are our hospitals to deal with issues of calamities, issues of emergencies like what happened in Mukumu? Because if these matters were, if the issues were addressed fast enough, we would have saved the lives of these children in Mukumu. So again, the Minister of Health should ensure that in every sub-county or near schools, we have one hospital that is well equipped with the nurses, with the medicine, with laboratory, so that in the future we are able to prevent or to address these issues with the urgency that it deserves. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the...
Thank you. Members, if you can, please use less than 3 minutes. The Honorable Dorothy Kiara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me an opportunity to contribute to this very important intervention. Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this important motion this evening. As much as it is a time of crisis, Mr. Speaker, and before I do that, allow me to join the families of the departed souls. I condole with the family of the girls and students who have lost their lives. I too join the family of the teacher who lost her life in line of duty. Mr. Speaker, it becomes quite an interesting debate when we are debating a crisis because it has happened, Mr. Speaker. And it perturbs me the more when I see the Minister for Education appearing in Mukumu Girls in person, where else it is his responsibility to tour all these schools and have the knowledge and know how schools are run. Mr. Speaker, just like we normally do, we are very good in being reactive when issues happen instead of being proactive. I'm saying this because members in this House have raised issues on over-enrollment of schools, congestion in schools, overpopulation in schools, and I want to state very clearly in this House, Mr. Speaker, it is not in the mandate of any head teacher or any principal to overcrowd a school. The school enrollment is done at the Ministry of Education. They are the people who keep the statistics. It is the ministry that knows school A has so many students. It is the same Ministry of Education that is in charge of infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. And when a crisis happens like now, one wonders then who is to blame. Mr. Speaker, sir, it is unfortunate that we are talking when we still have students who are in hospital and maybe struggling and fighting for their life. It's very unfortunate. But I want to be told, what is the Minister for Education doing other than saying, I have sacked a principal? What is the Minister of Education doing now that schools will close in 2 weeks' time? What measures is he putting in place to ensure that all schools are safe come January? Mr. Speaker, we even have programs through the Ministry of Health where all people can be immunized against certain diseases. For example, cholera, Mr. Speaker. There is a jab for cholera. I should imagine the CS Education as at now should be looking for the Ministry of Health so that all students are immunized against cholera before schools open, because I'm sure we can't be able to do infrastructure in the coming 2 weeks. Mr. Speaker, I want to support.
Member of Parliament for Taita Taveta, the Honorable Lydia Mzigi.
Thank you, Honorable Chair, for also giving me an opportunity to add my voice in this very important adjournment motion. And Honorable Chair, I also want to appreciate Honorable Tindi for bringing such a motion. And I want to begin by also sending my condolences to the family and friends of the departed souls. Mr. Speaker, it is very unfortunate that as a country we are in such a sad state of affair, a very sad state of affair. That, Mr. Speaker, you can send your child to school to learn and they come back in coffins. Mr. Speaker, it is very, very scary. It is worrying. And the parents of in Kenya are worried about such kind of a situation. A lot has been said, Mr. Speaker. We have heard of food poisoning. We have also heard of water. We have heard of a lot has been said regarding this case, sanitation and stuff like that. But Mr. Speaker, we have policies. We have policies on matters sanitation. We have policies on matters hygiene in our school. And the biggest problem that we have is implementation. If we can, all the policies can be implemented. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, such kind of situations can be avoided in our schools. Today, we are speaking of 2, 3, 4 schools. But this situation can escalate, Mr. Speaker, if we are not careful, if we are not making the necessary follow-ups to what is supposed to be done to our schools. Mr. Speaker, we used to have frequent inspections when we were in school. We used to see different inspections taking place in our schools. What happened to those inspections? Where did they disappear to? There are people who are sleeping on the job, Mr. Speaker, and they need to wake up from that slumber land. We cannot, as a country, continue to lose our students in school because of people who are not doing their job. So, Mr. Speaker, I really appreciate that Honorable Tindi has brought this motion of adjournment so that we can discuss such kind of a situation, so that, Mr. Speaker, as the school closes, we want to see action. We want to see our schools being cleaned, being inspected. We want to see the Ministry of Health. We want to see the Ministry of Education moving with speed to making sure that our schools are safe for our children. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity to add my voice on this.
Honorable John Waluke.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me a chance also to contribute on this. First, I want to thank Honorable Tindi Mwale for bringing up this matter, this motion. I rise to support it, Mr. Speaker, that officers, health officers, Mr. Speaker, are sleeping on their job, because as we speak, even today, Mr. Speaker, they have not told the nation, the country, about the problem that really affected those schools, Mr. Speaker. Before I continue, Mr. Speaker, I want to pass my condolence to the families that were affected. Sorry for that, losing their loved ones, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this country, sometimes people earn money for not working. The Minister for Health, as we speak, Mr. Speaker, she needs to consolidate or to mobilize all doctors in this country, Mr. Speaker, to visit the 7 schools, Mr. Speaker, that has been mentioned adversely about this disease. Although they have not mentioned exactly the disease itself, Mr. Speaker, that is to show weakness about maybe our officers, health officers or public health officers, Mr. Speaker, who are concerned. Mr. Speaker, when something like this happens,
the country takes so long to tell or to announce to its citizens to know a problem like this one. Rather than opening, closing up the school, Mr. Speaker, means we are taking diseases all over the country, because these students come from all over the counties, all over the countries, the country, Mr. Speaker. They need to treat them. They need to check and take blood tests to know what kind of disease. If it was food aflatoxin, Mr. Speaker, sometimes in schools, you can get, I always visit my schools, Mr. Speaker, even in the kitchens. The cooks are very dirty, some of them. They are not clean. And that is how these kind of problems we are getting to our students, Mr. Speaker. For those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, let me support this motion and thank Honorable Tindi Mwale for bringing up this support. Thank you.
For West Mugirango, the Honorable Stephen Mugaka.
Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for this opportunity. I thank Honorable Tindi Mwale for moving this very important adjournment motion. And I join my colleagues in paying tribute to the departed young souls and educators at Mukumu and the rest of Mulembe Nation. Mr. Speaker, this is a very emotive moment. When a parent takes a child to school, that is their investment, that is their future. And a disaster of this magnitude striking at a public school, I think is a wake-up call for all of us citizens, particularly those of us in leadership, because education is the core business of a parliamentarian. And therefore, instead of the blame game, and I do thank the Minister or the CS for Education for flying there, and I distance myself from those colleagues of mine who are vilifying the CS of Education who is not a medic. Our children did not die of an overdose of education, but because of the substances they took with their mouths, and therefore it is a health issue rather than an education issue. And therefore, we really must be worried as a nation if 2 weeks later we do not have a diagnosis or a pathological report showing us the cause of death of our angels at Mukumu. And who knows, because it started with one school, it's spreading to others, and it can end up being a national disaster. Thank God the schools are just closing, but that is not a panacea. As a nation, we should be able to use flying doctors and send the best medics in town to go and establish the root cause of that problem and be able to proactively manage it before it finishes a whole generation. And on behalf of the people of West Mugirango, I want to condole with the parents who have lost their children. I want to condole with the teachers. My father was one, because we have lost one of them in the course of this problem. And truly, this is not a moment to blame one another, but a moment to sit, reflect, find solutions, and save our children. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Asante, Bwana Spika. Mimi nitasema kwa uchache sana. Mheshimiwa Spika, kwanza nitoe pole zangu kwa familia zilizopoteza wanafunzi wale na mwalimu ambaye pia tulimpoteza. Mheshimiwa Spika, mimi kama mzazi nataka tu niseme kwamba serikali ina jukumu kubwa la kuchunga watoto wetu wakiwa shule. Haitakuwa vyema, Mheshimiwa Spika, wakati wa mitihani tunaona mawaziri wanakimbia kila mahali, wanaenda wakifuatilia mitihani isiibiwe ama isifanyike vibaya. Lakini Mheshimiwa Spika, swala hili la afya lazima serikali ilivalie njuga na iangalie kwamba mawaziri ambao wanahusika, waziri wa afya na waziri wa elimu, watembee shule zetu zote, wakaangazie vipi wanafunzi wetu wanaishi katika mabweni, na katika shule zetu kuangalia vipi wako na facilities za kutosha ili janga kama hili lisitokee tena. Mheshimiwa Spika, nikimaliza, tumepoteza watoto wetu kwa ajali za barabarani, tumepoteza watu wetu wengi kwa ajali, kwa mambo tofauti. Tunakataa shetani huyu wa kupoteza watoto wakiwa mashuleni. Kwa hivyo Mheshimiwa Spika, serikali lazima itupatie baada ya mswada huu itupatie ripoti kamili. Je, shule zetu ziko vipi? Na kushukuru Mheshimiwa Spika.
I thank you so much, Honorable Speaker. Allow me, on behalf of the great people of Rangwe, to empathize and condole with the families who've lost their beloved ones by way of our children and our teacher. It takes so much to train only one teacher. The country puts on so much to train a teacher. Teachers make us who we are. When we lose them by the food they eat, it is really very painful. I ought to have contributed to this matter, Honorable Speaker, as a food scientist, because this is entirely food science, and it entails concepts of food safety management systems. There are already established food safety management systems that could have been used and adopted by the ministry, such that before any feeding program or before any school is allowed to offer food in school, they should show that they are going to manage the safety of the food that they give the children. We have basic food management system, and the cheapest and the oldest is good manufacturing practice, otherwise called good hygienic practice. Just putting basic hygiene to the processing and management of foods. Raws are put separately, the cooked ones are put separately, and we have safe food. We look at the hygiene of the food workers in the school systems. I believe this can be adopted. We have what we call HACCP system of food safety management. HACCP system is hazard analysis and critical control point concept, Honorable Speaker. This is a mid-modern food safety management system that was brought in the early 60s. We could adopt this, Honorable Speaker, and save our children from dying. Honorable Speaker, we have the ISO 2018. We had 2015 version, but right now we are practicing the 2018 version. If these basic food management systems are adopted, Honorable Speaker, then we could have our children put to safety, especially with the food that we eat. Who is to blame? Members have already mentioned who is to blame. Management system, blah, 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 blah. But I want to say, Honorable Speaker, the persons to be blamed over the death of our children in the schools are these members of parliament, especially from the 290 constituencies. They are endowed with money. They could build good infrastructure for use by our head teachers in managing the safety of our foods. I want to say, members, why don't we build dining halls? Why don't we build modern kitchens for use by our schools? Time is not on my side, Honorable Speaker, but I want to say I pass my condolences to these families. Long live Kenya, long live our schools, long live our school principals. And I pray, oh God, that you may condole, help with the families who are bereaved. I thank you, my Speaker and grandson of the great Rangwe constituency. Thank you, Honorable Kalum.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I want to also take you and support this motion by Tindi Mwale. Honorable Speaker, without wasting any time, I want to first pass my condolences to anybody who has lost his life, the young angels and the teachers. Honorable Speaker, it is during Kibaki's time that we had the biggest education epiphany in this country, and that is the day secondary schools and also the free primary education. Honorable Speaker, since then, this country has gambled and done less in our education system to an extent where today everything looks confused. Honorable Speaker, I want to really appeal to the 13th Parliament to actually try to bring in line our education sector. And I know, Honorable Speaker, many people are saying that this parliament cannot achieve much. I've heard people say today that they cannot trust this parliament. But, Honorable Speaker, I and many members are willing to go that extra mile to be able to correct what has been done wrong, Honorable Speaker. And I want to say that whatever is happening right now is because we have failed in the policy implementation of what comes out of our education system from this House and from elsewhere, Honorable Speaker. I want to call upon the Ministry of Education and, Honorable Speaker, for the issue of feeding, it should be obvious that food should be safe. And I want to call upon people to invest in technology to ensure that they test the food before kids are given any food to eat in schools. There are many gadgets out there that are very cheap and can be invested so that we can invest on them so that they can be used.
Honorable Beatrice Elachi for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also stand to give my condolences to the girls and the teacher of Mukumu girls, and just to take home that indeed it is our responsibility, Mr. Speaker, as an institution. We are the ones who have been building the schools. It is time to look at all the schools, whether they still have the asbestos roofing. We need to remove those roofings. They are poisonous. Whether a school has taken, these are all schools that were best schools, Mr. Speaker. We need to have new roofings. We need to see where they get their water. We need to look at the food of aflatoxin and ensure all the signs that are there, Mr. Speaker, of these girls, you find that either it was food or water. But more importantly, going forward, it is that it is time also the Ministry of Health to give the findings to the parents, because this thing that the children are just at hospital, failing organs and everything is going to bring us another issue, Mr. Speaker. It is fair enough before the parents bury the bereaved ones, they should know what has just taken their children. So I want to plead with the Ministry of Health, do not keep the parents wondering with anxiety. They have already lost their best ones. They've already lost what they have invested for many years, and now they are here. So with those few remarks, Mr. Speaker, I beg that this House will go to every school. Go and see the last time they washed their tanks. Go and see what is happening in the kitchen. They might be staying with the rats, with all the Mendes, and we are just here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Beatrice Elachi. Honorable Bisao Kakai.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. On behalf of the Kiminini people, we'd like to send our condolences to the Mukumu girls for those losses. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, lots of challenges, infrastructural deficits, and we continue to see this even in my own backyard. And one of the reasons is because of the minimal budgets that have been put from the Ministry of Education. Today, what most institutions are trying to do is quick fixes. You find makeshift kitchens, dormitories, dining halls. There are even those who are not having sufficient places, like especially now it's raining, you'll find that there are kids even who don't have a place to feed. Again, we see also that the purposeful planning is not possible because of the limited budgets that we have. And looking at what is happening, this is just the beginning, and this trend will continue because the population increases, our infrastructure is very, very poor, there's improper designs, buildings and compound layout is not completely acceptable. So again, lack of basic amenities, an example, lavatories, water continues to hound these schools. To conclude, Mr. Speaker, I would wish that through this House, we ensure that we've got like standardized designs, whereby we ensure also that there is a maximum number of kids that have to be there. Because today we continue to see principals even admitting more kids than the facilities that are available. But it's because of the pressure based on the population in those areas. Secondly, scheduled inspections of all institutions, which should even be included in calendars, so that at least even on a quarterly basis, we find that there are inspections going on. And most important also, Mr. Speaker, sir, to ensure that in every institution or in every sub-county, there is a medic who...
Order, honorable members. I hope we will pick up from the points raised in the motion to have Parliament resolve very constructively in terms of this tragedy that befell our students and another teacher, I believe, right here. I also joined the House on behalf of the Speaker in condoling the families that lost beloved ones, both in respect of our teachers who should be training our students and our students. Honorable members, the time being 7:05 p.m., this House stands adjourned until Wednesday, the 19th day of April 2023 at 9:30 a.m.